I look at it as a moment of weakness for the West, right? That was you look at it generically and it's like, why does the West feel so weak? I would argue it's Donald Trump's leadership, right? He's the leader of the West. The United States president is always going to be the leader of the West. And right now, Putin, Xi, and with Modi sort of picking sides here right now, feels like we're on the outside looking in. And in some ways that Trump tweet only reinforced that feeling.
Hi, I'm Maddie, Hale, and welcome to the Trump Report. Today I'm joined by former MSNBC moderator and host of the Chuck Todd cast today. And just a reminder that you can watch us every day, Monday through Friday, on Times Radio's YouTube page, or you can stream us as a podcast wherever you get your podcast. Chuck, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report again.
Great to see you, Maddie.
So much has happened in the last few days in terms of the world stage. And I want to start off with, of course, this China holding its military parade today to mark the 80th anniversary of Japan's surrender in World War II. Now, in attendance, we saw, of course, President Putin, we saw Kim Jong-un, and we, of course, Xi Jinping hosting. Now, Trump reacted to this reunion or this meeting between the three of them. He wrote on Truth Social, "May President Xi and the wonderful people of China have a great and lasting day of celebration. Please give my warmest regards to Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un as you conspire against the United States of America." Chuck, what's your reaction to that?
It was almost like, the kid got left out of the cool kids club, right? And he's like bummed that he didn't get invited. Look, I think the bigger development was the earlier visitor to China a day earlier, and that's the president of India, Modi, and the fact that Modi is running into the arms of China after the United States. Frankly, this goes back. This has been a 20-year project. It started with Bush, Obama, and Trump too, right? Everybody, Biden as well. It was the courting of India to try to help corporate America as you try to get them to leave China and do more business in India. And then this tariff war that Trump started with India and Modi has thrown him over to there. So look, the whole thing, it was, I look at it as a moment of weakness for the West, right? That was you look at it generically and it's like, why does the West feel so weak? I would argue it's Donald Trump's leadership, right? He's the leader of the West. The United States president is always going to be the leader of the West. And right now, Putin, Xi, and with Modi sort of picking sides here right now, feels like we're on the outside looking in, and in some ways that Trump tweet only reinforced that feeling.
And that's interesting you say the leader of the West, Chuck, because that's not really a sentiment that I had read or heard about in the last, few years. It's been in the last week. People have been writing that it's just a reminder he's the leader of the West. Now, we'll get into the significance of Modi clearly not backing down in a minute, but to start off with, do you think there was a message being sent to the West and Trump from these three leaders who were meeting on the world stage, heavily documented, visibly together and aligned?
Well, it certainly looks like it was, right? I think that it's a message that as aggressive as the United States has been at trying to hold China back on its economy, that China's like, hey, we can play this game too. When you think about the humiliation, frankly, that I think now the Alaska summit has turned into for Donald Trump, where Vladimir Putin hasn't just thumbed his nose at Trump, but is now, he attacked a city in the West in Ukraine that had so few attacks that the city didn't have a curfew. In fact, at first they assumed it was a thunderstorm when the missiles dropped. They put a European office under attack. It's as if you couldn't be disrespecting the Trump relationship more than Putin has done already. So, yeah, look, I think this whole thing was I'll be honest, it felt like a collective middle finger to the United States, which is probably why Trump, you shouldn't show that you're irritated. And, Trump doesn't hide anything. I've always said I'd love to play poker against Donald Trump because he never keeps anything, never holds his cards close to the vest. He always tells you what he's thinking. But again, I go back to that tweet. the feeling he has is I think the feeling that China and Russia wanted, which is, yeah, this was our middle finger to you in the West.
Well, how do you think, you mentioned this Alaska summit, Chuck, and how do you think it makes Trump look in the sense that he physically rolled out the red carpet for Vladimir Putin to arrive, full military flyover and everything, which some people thought was, an act of strength, but it was a welcomed meeting, handshakes, smiles between the two. And then Xi Jinping has done the exact same thing with Putin, Kim Jong-un, and Narendra Modi there. And I wonder, he's doing that for what we would call now, the Axis of Upheaval, or whatever they're being referred to now. But Trump did that for Putin only 3 weeks ago.
It's astonishing. And we now know, look, Trump desperately wants this Nobel Peace Prize. And you now look at it through the prism of that desire, right? Why did he roll out the red carpet for Putin? He was desperate to get Putin to agree to something, to agree to a ceasefire. And in fact, I think he thought he was going to get one. There's more reporting to be done, but it's pretty clear. I've had some sources indicate to me that the person who's been dealing with Putin on behalf of Trump, this Steve Witkoff, the special envoy, that he just totally misheard Putin. And he set Trump up for failure. Trump wouldn't have done that summit if he didn't think he was getting even a temporary ceasefire, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, just something. And so the whole point of rolling it out and to make Putin feel like an equal was to get him to do this. And he didn't do it. And then 3 weeks later is essentially accepting the courtship of our chief rival, right? Of the West's chief rival in China. And oh, by the way, just signed a huge new gas deal with Russia, a 30-year deal that doubles the amount of oil and gas that the Russians send. They're building another pipeline in Siberia. I mean, this is a relationship that is very tight, and it's going to be a real challenge to the West.
Do you think that from what your sources are telling you, Chuck, do you think that there was a miscommunication between Steve Witkoff and the Kremlin when he traveled to Moscow the week before?
100%. There is, because you get this sense that nobody else thought, what Witkoff claimed that Putin had agreed to, there wasn't a lot of other indications that was the case. So it was either Witkoff got a heads up on something that nobody else got, or he misheard something.
Chuck, and now that did he just not take his translator again?
Yeah, I know. I think when I'm sure Mr. Witkoff is really good at negotiating a real estate deal. And maybe if you and I were buying a condo, we would want him there in the room helping negotiate the cost of that. I'm sorry. Everything you hear, he's had no briefings with experts who really have studied Putin for years and years and years. He just has gone in there. And this is multiple times now where he's come out of a meeting with Putin thinking they've got something. And each time it's as if, the rug was literally pulled out from under him. But I think it's because he doesn't know what he heard. And this is what inexperience gets you.
Trump was asked about Putin and everything going on in a press conference yesterday. And he said that he's learned some very interesting things about Putin, that he will share more details soon. Spoke about, alluded to consequences. So do you have any idea, Chuck, what he would mean when he says he's learned some very interesting things?
Look, I think I don't know what that's in some ways a typical Trumpism. Does he? Sometimes that means it's personal stuff that he might want to leak to the public just to mess with people. He does that at times, but realistically, I think what's going to happen is I do think, the only place that congressional Republicans are willing to push back on Trump on in public is on how they deal with Russia and Putin. And so I do think that it's sanctions, that's what's coming. Congress will likely pass a new package of them in some form because there's been bipartisan support. It's about the only thing there's bipartisan support for right now. And I think in this case, Trump might actually level them. Because, I don't know how you don't. What's really frustrating if you're a supporter of what's happening to Ukraine is the United States actually has a lot of leverage against Putin. He will not use it. And it is really, it's really disconcerting.
back to the Alaska summit, Chuck. Trump, he sat for an interview, spoke about his relationship with Putin and the Alaska summit. And he said, "We're not talking about something I started. I inherited this war, and all I'm trying to do is put out the flame. And I thought I had it done. I did it 7 times with others. I did it with wars that were tougher than this in terms of nobody. So 3 of those wars are going on for more than 30 years, and I got them all done. This war is just, it's very difficult. It's been a difficult war." And I wonder, is that Trump's roundabout admission that he really can't get a deal, a ceasefire, a peace deal, or even cooperation with Putin?
I think it is. I mean, I think that's the correct way of reading it, that when he says that, it's his way of admitting that, you know, and he always tries to put Zelensky and Putin on equal footing as being stubborn. And you're like, you know, no, there is one side here that is, you know, Zelensky has been willing to capitulate on a lot of things. Putin has not capitulated on a single thing, right? The fact that he couldn't even agree to a weekend ceasefire. He couldn't even agree to why, you know, I don't know what Trump thinks he's going to get out of him. You know, it goes back to, you know, a lot of people want to say, oh, it's because Putin has something on him. I don't think that. I think he viewed Putin as an ally because Putin didn't want Hillary elected president, and he thought, okay, that means I'll be able to deal with him. But I think what he's just not understood is Putin doesn't want the West to succeed. He doesn't want any American president to succeed, and he looks forward to humiliating any American president when he gets a chance to do it.
And Trump clearly thought that there was a personal relationship there and that he would be able to get this over the line just based on charming Putin and being kind to him and treating him as an equal as opposed to a dictator. But that clearly hasn't worked. But Chuck, on what else was happening in China was this bilateral 2.5 meeting between President Putin and Kim Jong-un. Putin has invited Mr. Kim to Russia to visit, and then what we've seen is that these two have obviously worked together in terms of Russia trying to win its war. North Korea sent around 10 to 12,000 troops. Around 4,000 of those have died. They've sent millions of artillery rounds and around 100 ballistic missiles. Kim Jong-un said that if there is anything I can do or must do for you and the Russian people, I consider it my duty as a fraternal obligation. So how confident do you think we are, Chuck, that Putin was asking Kim Jong-un for more help in winning this war?
Sure he was. I mean, because, you know, he needs more bodies. And the North Koreans have been more than happy to provide it. Look, I think this is a scary development in a couple of ways. Number one is just the simple fact that what it does is it buys, you know, Putin does have some concern that the public's going to get tired of this, right? How much more of the draft or conscripts can he find? To, you know, they're paying so much to find soldiers as it is. So the fact that the North Koreans are willing to, frankly, just put in bodies on the front line. But here's the second part of this that I think is long-term scary. You know, the North Koreans have been building up this military for some time, but they've never been able to test it. Well, now for the first time, they're learning, and you've heard this from some war experts who've been watching it. When the first North Korean troops came, they were kind of not, you know, they didn't know what they were doing. You know, they would march in a line, and they were sort of easy targets for the Ukrainians. But they've been learning, right? You know, there's nothing like live action that sort of gets you to pivot and start to think of new tactics as a military. And if I'm in South Korea, I'm very concerned that we now have a North Korean military who's learning real-time war techniques in a real live action situation in Ukraine. And so, no, this relationship, especially now that there might be fewer Iranian drones that the Russians can buy, considering how much we've set back the Iranian military. So he needs this relationship with North Korea, and I think it's really dangerous how much training now the North Korean military is getting in this Ukraine war.
Absolutely. And then we'll get back into the Putin and Modi relationship. Now, some of the comments coming out of this event, Chuck, Modi describing their relationship as a special and privileged bond, Putin calling him a dear friend. They discussed trade, security. Modi praised their energy collaboration. Now, this is taking place just days after Trump raised tariffs to 50% on India. So it does seem as if they're looking at these recent tariffs on India and sanctions threats and thinking, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, and it's the thing with the Indians. You got to be careful here with Modi. He doesn't, he really is unaligned, right? India's always been famously in, sort of one of the leading countries in the non-aligned movement. Even during the Cold War, they were quasi allies more with Russia and the old Soviet Union than they were with us. It sort of is the reason why the United States has a relationship with Pakistan at all, right? A little bit of a check on India. But Maddie, it's hard for me that I'm about to say this, but apparently Trump was offended that the head of the Pakistani government officially nominated Trump for the Nobel Prize, right? When he helped by Trump believes he negotiated the ceasefire between the Indians and the Pakistanis. He's really the only one that believes this. The Indians don't believe he really played a role. And when Trump pressed Modi to say, hey, look what the Pakistanis did, he thought that was going to motivate Modi to do it. That actually had the exact opposite impact on Modi. It was almost like you go pound sand. So then Trump goes and raises the tariffs, and he goes and shows up in China. So, look, Trump's mismanaged this relationship, and look, Modi's not easy to deal with, but this is an extraordinarily important ally. Do you know how many companies in America had already starting to shift their resources from China to India? Basically, they thought with the blessing of the U.S. government that this was part of a larger strategic, move away, decoupling from China to try to give, and then Trump does this with India. It's left corporate America reeling a little bit with what he's done. And it's like I said, we've been working on this relationship through multiple presidents, had made huge progress. India looked like it was really becoming important ally. Look at the Quad, India, Australia, Japan, the United States. This is the beginning of what's supposed to be a bit of a military alliance to be a check on China. If they do get aggressive with Taiwan, and now we've lost India, this is a huge blow to the West and a huge blow to the United States.
Well, what about when Congress returns this week and we have Lindsey Graham's sanctions bill? Do you think that will hit the Senate floor, perhaps, Chuck? And that would, of course, hit these companies importing Russian energy with a 500% tariff.
Well, if we're truly offended by what Modi and Putin and Xi just did, then the answer is yes. You would think that this is the leverage that the Trump administration would want. But, the Senate has been willing to give him a lot of powerful sanctions tools, and Trump doesn't always use them. And it's just so strange. He's tougher on Modi than he is on Putin. He's tougher on Modi than he is on Xi. And it's just, and part of that is his mindset, right? I think he does view the world as sort of, you think of it more like mob bosses, right? And he's the head of the mob, the Western mob. And he sees Putin as a mob boss, and he sees Xi and they're equals. He doesn't see Modi as an equal. And so he thinks anybody he doesn't see as an equal, he thinks he can just beat over the head with these tariff sticks. That's how he treats Zelensky in Ukraine. It's how he treats the EU at times, right? He doesn't treat him the same way he treats Putin and Xi. And so I think I do think the Senate's going to pass a tougher sanctions bill, but I don't think it's going to be targeting China, number one. And I just don't know. I mean, we've had tough sanctions on Russia for most of the last 3 years, and they've gotten around it because India's been buying their oil, because China's been buying their oil. So, and until you stop that, and obviously what Trump just did just pushed India closer to China and Russia. It didn't pull them away.
And he's willing to let his own people suffer, willing to let them live in poverty, as long as he can afford the war and keep, oligarchs and the rich stay rich. But Chuck, moving on to more domestic news, the US House oversight committee led by the Republicans released 33,000 documents relating to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell this week. Now, 97% of them were already made public. The other 3% was related to flight data in regards to Epstein's planes and travel. So it was largely anticlimactic, Chuck, but everyone's still wanting the DOJ to release it all. Is that correct?
Well, we're going to find out how big the everyone is there in your question. Meaning, so what they did yesterday was an attempt to try to de-escalate things with their own Republicans, right? There's a group of about 20 to 30 Republicans who are not happy with how the Epstein stuff's been handled. And they're ready to vote to sort of force a vote here, to force a release of these real documents that haven't been released. You pointed out what was released here was stuff that, was sort of already been released. The lead Republican on this, who's been working with the Democrats, a guy named Thomas Massie, he still believes there's enough Republicans that are going to force this vote, where if you get a majority of the House of Representatives to sign a petition, essentially, to force this vote, they have to hold it, right? They can't cancel the vote. I think what the Republican speaker was hoping is that by releasing these files, by bringing in the Epstein victims, that it would sort of be like a relief valve on steam, right? You let a little steam out of the valve. I don't know if it's going to work. I still think it's one of the few times that you've seen a few of these MAGA Republicans willing to push back, and I think it's because this conspiracy about Epstein, right? This belief that was he a secret asset of the Israeli government, right? There's all sorts of conspiracy. A lot of people have built their political careers on that conspiracy, and they can't walk away from it. And so I think the votes are going to be there to force the real release.
Did you see the video of Congresswoman Nancy Mace?
Yeah,
leaving, crying?
I did. Look, I'll just be honest. She's a performer. Okay, so you don't always know. You don't always know what's genuine and what isn't. I'm sorry to say that, but it's because this is kind of the reputation she's created, which, it does feel as if she always knows she's got a social media camera, somewhere, chronicling what she's doing on this. But look, if it is genuine, that tells you there's going to be more than just a handful of Republicans willing to buck the president and the Justice Department on this.
Does it feel like the committee, all those Republicans, or anyone who doesn't want these files to be released, the White House, does it feel as though it is continuing to put Donald Trump in a bad light, in a suspicious light?
I think he's weathered the worst of this storm. I do. And I go back to, look, it's really hard. I've always, this really well in the UK as well. It's really hard to keep secrets. And the fact is, there's never been, it seems as if what they're afraid of is acknowledgement that Trump and Epstein were close friends. What you don't ever hear or see is that there's any actual allegation that he did something untowards, right? And unless that's in there, I think at this point, if the new records indicate what I think they're going to indicate, which is just simply he was a frequent flyer with Epstein, and that's about it, that I think what Trump fears is that it tarnishes his anti-establishment credibility, right? It was always the other elites that were with Epstein, not him, right? And so I think that's what he fears politically, that it sort of punctures that idea that he's the warrior against the elites rather than actually somebody who wanted to be right there with them, in the same manifest as a Bill Gates or in the same manifest as a Prince Andrew.
Chuck, just finally, we've seen these photos of Trump's hands with rumours circulating that he was dead because he had a few days off from the press and being seen. We've obviously seen him come back in full force. and facing the media, taking question after the question. He said that he wasn't really aware that there were rumors about his death. But now that he's back in public, have you heard anything about his health in general? Obviously, we know he's not dead, but is there any news on your front or any sources that tell you that, yeah, his health has, there's issues there?
Not beyond that he's got sort of what typical old people issues, especially if you're somebody that didn't really live a healthy life, right? While he's not a smoker or a drinker, which is on the good side of living a healthy life, he doesn't exercise. He never has. And he doesn't really eat very well. And so he's got sort of the same sort of stuff that, and he's taking it appears he's taking blood thinners, and that's why he's, easily bruising or looking like he's bruising. But the problem is, they created this conspiratorial mindset about presidential health, right? It was the right-wing MAGA world that every day was talking about, is it a robot that's there now? It's not really Biden, right? They were always a conspiracy theory. Now the left, is behaving now the same way as the right did about Biden. They're behaving the same way about Trump, right? And taking some little snippet and then going deep into the conspiratorial holes. I will say this administration doesn't tell the truth about his health. They never have, right? You always hear when a doctor puts out a note, he's the healthiest 79-year-old I've ever met in my life. You're like, come on, right? They'll release like his height and weight, and you're like, really? That's his weight? Literally his height and weight will be the almost identical to the National Football League's Defensive Player of the Year, and you're like, that guy is ripped and is like in great shape. There is no way that Donald Trump has the same height and weight as that person. And so because they don't have any credibility, I do think these conspiracies take hold even faster on his health. And I think these health feeding frenzies, Maddie, are going to be a more consistent thing because when you look at the problem he's got, I think you're going to start to see him not walk as much, right? We already don't see him walk a lot.
Unless on the golf course.
Well, no. Is he walk or is he in a golf cart and he gets out 2 steps? And in fact, that golf cart, I think there's a reason why we see him in the golf cart a lot. Interesting.
And you're right because under the Biden administration, we just saw this health, cognitive abilities, physical health become such a headline. It's going to be a headline for any member of government who's over the age of 75.
100%. It's the actuary tables.
Oh, Chuck Todd, thank you so much for joining the Trump
Maddie.
Report today.
Happy fall, right? It's sort of, right? September. This is sort of I always call it the second new year, right? It's like a back to school. It's like, here we are, full force.
I'm not one of those people that wishes summer away.
I don't either.